Welcome to this episode. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the issue, or if you might be struggling with parents who are always judging your food choices. Because as we know with binge eating recovery, if you've been following me for a while, that we need to get rid of food judgment. We need to get rid of people calling foods good and bad. You need to stop calling foods good and bad, because calling foods good and bad has this mindset of making our self-esteem very vulnerable. And how, you might ask? So let's say we eat something good. Okay, we might consider that good. Okay, no worries about that. But the moment we eat something we call bad, we start to internalize this feeling of, okay, maybe I'm a bad person. I've consumed something that's bad, consumed something that's sinful, evil, shameful. So you're gonna start to feel that, oh, okay, maybe I'm a bad person. I don't deserve self-care. I don't deserve self-love. I have no willpower. I don't deserve to have any of this. I might as well just binge eat or overeat all of the foods in the cupboard because I think I'm just an evil person. I don't deserve anything. So calling foods good and bad, essentially, can be really, really difficult and make your self-esteem very vulnerable. But in this episode, I'm going to be talking about what can you do if your parents or the people you live with are constantly judging your food choices. When you give yourself permission to have like a brownie, then maybe your parents, for example, might say, oh, Jonathan, why are you having that brownie? Don't you know that's bad? You just eaten just 2 hours ago. So these comments are really, really unhelpful. So let's get straight to the episode. But before we get started, hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm a dietitian that supports people who are struggling with binge eating. And even if you're not struggling with binge eating, you'll find this episode quite helpful. And if you ever have a friend who opens up to you about the struggles of their parents or the loved ones judging their food choices, then you have access to these great tips in your toolkit. So there's this really interesting quote I'd like to start off with by Alan Wolfelt, and it says, food is symbolic of self-love when words are inadequate. So that's quite an interesting quote on this topic of binge eating recovery. And the reason why it might be quite interesting, I believe, is that when you're not receiving self-love, like genuine, unconditional self-love from your loved ones or your parents, then that's why we turn to food, because sometimes words are inadequate. Words such as, I'm proud of you, I'll always be here for you. And then you see those people who say those things just eventually start judging your food choices. And I understand it might come from the best intentions. They want to take care of your health and look after your relationship with food. But in reality, this is actually harming your relationship with food. It's spiraling you into guilt, shame, embarrassment. In Psychology 101, if you tell someone to do something, then they're going to start to feel anxious about it. They're not actually going to do it. But if you support them and guide them without telling them ideally what to do, just guide them and support them and suggest things. You can suggest things, but telling people what to do does not work. Psychology 101. So let's talk about parental food judgment. So we need to understand, first of all, that just because someone's judging your food choices doesn't mean they're evil, they're greedy, they want to control you. We need to look deeper into that. What's been going on in the past for them? What formed their relationship with food? What's causing them to have these judgmental thoughts around food? We might want to look back, okay, maybe their parents or the people they lived with when they grew up with were judging them for their food choices. Maybe they were being shamed for simply enjoying a brownie. Maybe they were just being shamed for eating an hour after a meal, just having a snack or even having another meal. So this can have this mindset of, okay, if I was being judged in the past for this, then judgment equals bad. I don't want to be judged. I want to be looked up in society. I want to please people. So I don't want this for my child. I don't want this for my loved one. So they're going to judge you and point you and guide you to not being brought down, not being judged by other people. And I believe most of the times these judgmental thoughts from your parents or your loved ones are ultimately coming from a good place, so you won't be judged by other people. But ultimately, at the deepest level, and we're getting quite deep here, judgment is not part of love. Judgment doesn't deserve any place in unconditional love. And studies show that parental judgment of kids or children's food choices leads to disordered eating behaviors, guilt, shame, embarrassment. So it's no surprise that when parents are judging your food choices, that you start to eat certain foods in secret. You start to just grab foods from the cupboard, then just bring them up to your room and start to eat them in secret, not eat them in public or in front of your loved ones. Maybe you eat a packet of crisps, and then maybe you just like shove them at the bottom of the trash bin, so whenever someone opens the trash bin, then they won't see what you've eaten. You just tuck it right to the bottom. And maybe you might be, in some cases, grabbing some food, hiding it in your clothes, and then just going to your room and just not letting anyone just hear what you're eating. If you're eating crisps, you'll try to drown it out with some noise, some music, loud music, or just even like thumping noises as you're eating. And although it sounds quite sad, there is so much judgment in society, and this is why people who are struggling with binge eating don't really talk about it that much, because binge eating or binge eating disorder, binge eating habits are surrounded and fueled by guilt, self-isolation. It's the reason why it's the most common eating disorder in the world. If you have the diagnosed eating disorder, it's the most common eating disorder in the world, but it doesn't gain lots of press because we often drown the word binge as something that's not so serious. We binge on Netflix, we binge on watching TV shows, we binge on console games, we binge on anything else. But for other people who are struggling with binge eating is a real serious term, and it can be quite distressing and quite triggering for some people. So remember, if you're a parent and you're listening to this, remember that food judgment can lead or can increase the risk of disordered eating behaviors. And this leads me on to the topic of self-esteem. How can food judgment or parents or loved ones judging your food choices affect your self-esteem? So at a psychological level, if you're feeling judged, say like I'm feeling judged by my parents or loved ones of my certain food choices, say I'm eating a brownie and I feel judged, then it's going to make me feel unworthy. And our worth shouldn't be determined on what we eat. You might have heard the term, you are what you eat, and that's completely not true. If I ate a hamburger, I'm not a hamburger, essentially. But in all seriousness, if you're being judged, this can affect your self-esteem. This might disconnect your relationship further with your parents or loved ones because you're feeling like this little thing, such as food, essentially, which is a basic human right, a basic need for survival. We're being judged for this. We're being judged for the things that give us happiness. We're being judged for the things that give us this sense of nostalgia. Let's say, for example, that breadsticks. You associate breadsticks with happiness, your birthday party when you were 5 years old, and you really, really enjoyed this. And it just brings back such good memories. And now that, let's say, you're 15 years old, you're eating breadsticks, and then your parents start to judge you, or your loved ones start to judge you. And then they start to say, like, oh, you just eaten an hour ago, and now you're having breadsticks? I think you should just have a piece of fruit instead, and just be healthy. You should be good, instead of having those bad breadsticks, because they're full of carbs, full of salt, and so many things. It'll make you feel unworthy. It's very invalidating to make you feel like the foods you once loved. It gives you psychological fulfillment, great memories. Now they're being pushed aside as being bad. It can make you feel unworthy, unloved, even ignored. There's a quote by Les Brown saying, like, don't let your opinion of someone become reality. And even if it's the closest person in the world, your best friend, your brother, sister, close parents, as close as they are, there are other people. Don't let any of their opinions become reality. You know yourself best, so don't let other people judging your food choices become your reality. So how can we develop healthy, supportive coping strategies for people who are judging your food choices, even parents who are judging your food choices? The first thing you can do is that if your parents or your loved ones are judging your food choices, is to be open and communicate with them. Be really honest on how much it's distressing you, because although they might be doing it at the best intention, if they don't know that it's distressing you and you feel all right with it, they're just going to continue doing it. Just to be honest, that you could say, for example, like, I really appreciate that you're trying to care for me and care for my health, but the way you're judging me for my food choices is giving me anxiety. It's making me nervous. It's making me feel like I don't want to eat in front of you. And although it's going to be an extremely difficult conversation, honesty and being open is the first step to building a safe environment. And also be honest with them and say to your parents or your loved ones that whenever they judge your food choices, the things you enjoy to eat, that it makes you feel very defensive about opening up with them You might not be able to feel comfortable and safe opening up about them with your mental struggles, things that happen in school, things that happen at work. It starts to build this wall between the both of you, and be honest about that. There was a study in 2017 by Pearson et al. That showed that communication between children with their parents improved their eating behaviors and reduced disordered eating symptoms such as guilt, shame, embarrassment, binge eating episodes, weight checking, and so many more. The next thing to talk about, which would be very helpful, is about setting boundaries and asserting your independence. So this goes back from my previous points that it's important to share and communicate with your parents or your loved ones, but now it's time to be quite firm and be quite honest about your boundaries, saying, I really appreciate next time if you don't talk about my food choices. Whenever I'm eating peanut butter and toast, I'd appreciate it if you don't comment on what I'm eating. And it sounds very strange to tell your parents what to do, but if you point them to professional resources and the links, I'm going to be linking some studies in the link in the description, that judgment of children's food choices can lead to disordered eating habits and can worsen relationship between parents or loved ones and children, and asserting independence. So whenever you find your loved ones or your parents judging you for your food choices, just be honest and call them out straight to the point, saying, can you please stop that? Can you please not judge me for what I'm eating right now? And you might need to remind them several times, and it's going to be very difficult and it might cause some distress, but they will get the point. And if it's getting to the point where they're not listening at all, then bring this towards your doctor, bring this towards your healthcare professionals, because they can bring together a holistic plan working with your parents or your loved ones, that this is something serious that should be counseled with the whole family in regards to invalidation and reducing judgment in the whole household. And if it's not being solved, this issue of parents not listening to the child or child having this relationship that is getting broken with his parents, then always bring it to your healthcare professional to sort this out in terms of counseling, in terms of therapy, and many more. And there's this really empowering quote that says your relationship with food is a reflection of your relationship with yourself. And it's important to seek out support, not just by simply talking to your parents or your loved ones, but if it gets to the point where your parents or your loved ones are not listening to you, then seek out support from the BEAT, B-E-A-T, Beat Eating Disorders website, because in the UK, that's the main national charity for people who are struggling with eating disorders, and it could provide chat lines, helplines, or I can give you some tips if you just message me on how to talk to your parents and not really harm this relationship between you two, your parents or your loved ones, and you. So in summary, I just want to end this with this little phrase. So we need to remember that your relationship with food is the most important thing. It's going to dictate or really contribute to your mental health, improving your mental health or worsening your mental health. And whether it's from your closest loved ones, your parents, friends, family, brothers, sisters, siblings, or many more, cousins, and many more, that the opinion of other people doesn't matter. It's about your relationship with food, and you should cultivate that. And it will be very difficult to be open and honest with your parents or your loved ones, but that will be a massive, massive step to healing your relationship with food, building up this safe space around your house or wherever you're living. Food should simply be a source of nourishment and pleasure, not a source of shame, guilt, and embarrassment. Your worth is not determined by the food on your plate and whatever you eat, or how other people judge you. Your worth is determined by how kind you are to yourself and how much self-love and self-acceptance you give to yourself. So remember, whether you're being judged by your friends, family, loved ones, whoever it is, remember the first step is to have open communication. So having open communication can start to build this safe space around your household. And it's really, really important. It's massively important to build this safe space, or try your best to build a safe space around this household, and have this empathy to remember that the people who are judging you, that they're not ultimately evil or greedy or mean. They're essentially being brainwashed by diet culture. I say brainwashed in strong quotation marks, that they've been brainwashed by diet culture to shame other people, to feel guilty about their bodies. Because remember that judgment, if they're judging other people, ultimately It's a reflection of their relationship with food, not with your relationship with food. So I hope you found this episode helpful, and if you have any questions, then let me know. Always message me in any of my social media channels. And if you haven't been judged by your parents or loved ones, and they've been really supportive, comment below what supportive phrases or sentences or what they've done to help support your relationship with food. So, thanks again for listening, and once again, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!